Hello and welcome to episode 403 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leakes. Damien, how are you doing? Welcome back.
I'm good, Andy. It's been a week of reader, listener, follower interaction, which is always great and always gives us a real buzz. In the last couple of episodes, you and I have mentioned our new hobby, which is cubing. So getting a Rubik's Cube, solving it. Firstly, being able to. We taught ourselves since Christmas and then as quickly as we can. I don't know why, but it seems to have caught hold of people's imagination who listen to the podcast. This is a money podcast, but people obviously are quite intrigued by cubing. So this week, we put on our Instagram some video of me solving the Rubik's Cube as quickly as I could. It was about 1.5 minutes. But then we seemed to melt the internet when we put on there you doing your Rubik's Cube solving as quickly as you can. We didn't speed it up, and you did it in 45 seconds, which isn't technically even your fastest. Days before, you'd done it in about 30 seconds. And we asked people to give you a rating out of 10 for how impressed they were, and that was, well, basically it was a wall of 10s, and even an 11 crept in there. So if you've not seen that, I'll try and pin it on our Instagram so you can have a look and you see Andy solving the Rubik's Cube. So that's been fun to have all your feedback. And actually this week we've got a couple of pieces that are inspired by reader questions, in fact, about what's going on in the world, in particular relating to energy and mortgages. So it's going to be slightly contemporary, this podcast, but I think it's going to be very useful for people. But before we move on, just indulge us, because we had promised that we'd read out some reviews, and all of these people that I'm going to read out will get a mug if they write in and give us their email address. And we had the Patcher2 on Apple Podcasts who wrote in saying it's the best no-nonsense personal finance podcast. Damien and the team are great to listen and easy to understand. He's able to share his knowledge and investment strategies so that anyone can understand them. He doesn't back away from complex topics. He tells it straight what you need to know. And once you've listened to a few episodes, explore his website and try out the trial of 80/20. On that, I just want to say a quick hello to Jordan, who's been writing this week. He seems to be a cubing fan, but also a fan of 80/20 Investor. He mentioned actually in his email how he'd been a member of 80/20 for 5 years, following my own 50k portfolio, which I run live. And the thing I really liked about it is he said it gave him confidence in the COVID crisis to keep his investments and in some respects invest what he had left in his account. So it's all about investing for the long term, and that's what he said he finds refreshing. 2 more quick reviews of the podcast. Clear and simple discussion from Richard816. A great discussion which sits really well if you don't want a hard sell financial discussion. They explain why a thing is as it is, give some width on opinion, and then situate roughly a path ahead for the majority. And the last one, working person guide, great financial information in an unbiased way. And just to give balance, we actually had a negative review this week, which was a bit disappointing when somebody said it was unstructured, which I find a bit hard to take, given that we actually structure it in the same way every week with 3 pieces. But we can't please everybody all of the time. So moving on to what's on this week's podcast, and it was interesting to hear one of those mention about explaining something, why it is. I'm going to answer a question that I've been asked about energy prices and about what people have been reading. Are the wholesale energy prices, if that's gas and electricity, falling? Are our energy bills about to go down? If so, what are we going to be paying? All of that. And I think it's an incredibly popular question and something that is really interesting to get into the nuance of. And there's stuff in there that I've learned from researching this that will influence how I'm going to plan my finances for the next year. We're talking even into next winter. I'm also going to talk about mortgage rates. So again, people have been asking about the direction of mortgage rates. Is it true they're all coming down? Is the worst over? These are 2 things that are worrying people the most at the moment. That's their energy bills and their mortgage rates, because obviously there are millions of people having to remortgage this year, so they're likely to see their mortgage rate go up. Energy prices are also sky high. People are wanting to have some reprieve from that. So are we going to get that in either of these things? Because they are probably, beside food, the 2 biggest things that people pay in a given month. And finally, Andy, you're going to do a piece that's a little bit more optimistic, I have to say. There are people out there who seem to be wanting to go on holiday and can afford to do it. We're seeing a lot of people reading a lot of content around holidaying and best travel credit cards, etc., etc. You're doing a piece relating to that.
That's right. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly cover airport lounges. Now, often people assume that airport lounges are reserved exclusively for business class travellers. Well, that's not the case. You can access airport lounges by paying a fee and even signing up for an annual membership. So I'm going to explain how that works and where it can work for you as a family as well. The sort of tricks, if you like, and also which airport lounges across the UK work out the cheapest. So what are we going to start with this week?
So let's do energy prices because this is interesting. I'm going to give a nod to the person who asked the question. It was Jennifer. She said that she's a long-time listener and a fan of the podcast. Thank you. I've learned so much. That's great to hear. Now, she said, I was listening to you asking for listener questions for new segments, and it's a little off topic. I actually don't think it is. I think it's a great question, this. I keep reading that gas prices are back to the pre-Russia-Ukraine war levels, but what does that mean for our household bills? When we see these gas and electricity bills start to reduce, will both reduce at the same time? And is it likely they would reduce the price cap if they did? Now, this is a really interesting topic because I'm going to have to take you on a journey to understand how the pricing of energy works in order for you to understand where energy prices are likely to be going forward. And like I said, particularly next year, because ultimately what we're all wondering is, will energy prices drop from where they are now? We're roughly paying about twice what we paid last winter. Are we going to get a reprieve? Will we be paying less going into the future? Now, we all hope we will. I'm going to give you the answer in this piece. Now, first of all, it is true that wholesale gas prices have fallen in recent months. Now, if you go on the Ofgem website, I will give a link in the show notes of this podcast. You can find that on the website as well for this particular episode. There are charts on the Ofgem website that tell you what the wholesale prices are. So you can go and look to see how much it costs for energy companies to buy gas. Now, the first thing I want to point out, electricity prices are heavily influenced by gas prices. And that's because of the importance of gas-fired power stations when it comes to actually producing some of the electricity that we use. So that answers straight away the link that occurs between gas and electricity prices that we ultimately pay. They are linked. So when gas prices rise, it causes the electricity prices to also go up, and the opposite is true. So that answers one part of that question. So when we see the prices move, and if they come down, we should hopefully see a movement in both. So when you look at the wholesale gas prices, you will see it quoted in pence per therm. So this is in sterling, and you will see a chart that nicely goes along, and then when we get to 2022, in the beginning of that, it starts to go up. So I'm going to talk about this in pounds just to make it easier rather than talking about hundreds of pence. Now, it is true that the price of wholesale gas has dropped. One thing you've got to bear in mind, though, the energy you use today hasn't all been paid for today and then delivered to you. They're having to buy it in advance. And so therefore the price of those contracts influence what the price of the energy will be. So when we see the gas price fall, you see headlines stating that, then the price may be falling now, but the contracts that they've bought that are locking in prices that they're going to deliver the gas in the future, there'll be a lag, there'll be a delay. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. So you see the headlines that the prices are coming down. Yes, they are, but because they buy and hedge and buy in advance, then that won't feed through straight away. It's going to be a delay. So that's the first thing to realise. Next up is, what is the price at the moment? So if we look at what the price of gas is costing at the moment for these companies to buy, it's roughly about £2 per therm. Okay, so how does that relate to where we've been in the past? In August 2022, we were nearly £6 per therm. So the price was nearly 3 times what it is now. And that was obviously a result of a lot of what's been going on in the backdrop in the energy market, largely a result of what's been going on in Ukraine. Okay, so it's fallen. That's great. But if you go back to the start of last year, so when the war broke out, energy companies were still paying between £2 and £2.50 per therm. So that's largely in the ballpark of where we are now. So that is looking at the energy price today versus where we were last year. If we go back further and we look at 2021, before the war broke out, then you are looking at about 65p per therm. So that is round about a quarter of what the price is now. So if you think about it, what that means is that gas wholesale prices are about 3 to 4 times now what they were before the war broke out, so at the back end of 2021. So even if you did a rough maths in your head, the great news you might be seeing on the news still means that we are above where we were before. So you wouldn't expect our bills to be lower or back where they were in 2021 based upon that price. But like I've already told you, the wholesale price of gas today doesn't feed straight through to what we pay as consumers until a later date. So there is that delay. So that means we need the price to keep falling and collapse if we want to see it eventually filter through to our bills. Now, of course, the other thing you've got to bear in mind are Ofgem's energy price cap and the government's energy price guarantee. Now, they are two levels which influence what we currently pay as consumers on our energy bill. Now, we're talking household averages here because you see the number chucked around. It's household averages that these caps are often quoted with. The caps work on the unit price that you pay for your energy, but you will see, for example, that the energy price cap, which Ofgem announced, is at £4,279 a year for a typical household. Just to recap, the energy market at the moment is being subsidised effectively, so what you pay as a consumer. So historically, the energy price cap was meant to work so people who were paying for energy who didn't switch around onto the best deals and ended up on the default tariff for energy companies weren't being overcharged. So it limited how much energy companies could charge them. Of course, what with energy prices going through the roof, it ended up being lower than the level we should be paying based upon where wholesale gas prices have been. And so that cap started to work in our favour, as in most people moved on to that standard tariff because it kept their energy bills lower. So that's what happened in the past. But then the government came along with its energy price guarantee, which created a subsidy, which therefore meant the average household only pays at the moment £2,500 a year. That's the average. Like I said, it's subsidised. For you, it will be different individuals, but we're using the average household figure. So you can see these two things are what you actually pay. The wholesale gas price is doing its thing in the background. What you pay is based upon the Ofgem's energy price cap and government's energy price guarantee. The energy price guarantee from the government is lower than the energy price cap. So what we all should be paying is much higher than what we currently are. The government has bailed us out effectively. So we should be paying at the moment as an energy price cap £4,279 per year on average per household for a dual fuel bill. But what we're actually paying is £2,500 on average because of the price guarantee from the government. So what that means is it's really what's going on with this Ofgem price cap and the energy price guarantee that matters to us. So the energy price guarantee from the government is going up to £3,000 in April. So our bills will be going up. So that's bad news because at the moment, the energy price cap from Ofgem is higher than that guarantee. As soon as it starts to come below that, we will start paying the energy price cap from Ofgem, or the government gets rid of its energy price guarantee. So what we really want to be worried about is where the energy price cap is going to go, because ultimately we can pretty much be rest assured the government's energy price guarantee is going to disappear. And at the moment, that's going to go on to £3,000 a year in April, like I said, but we're ultimately likely to pay the energy price cap from Ofgem in the future until such time as wholesale prices fall enough to bring prices down, competitiveness back into the energy market so we can have deals where we can shop around, and actually the deals we can get are below Ofgem's energy price cap as it should be. So for now, until that wholesale price keeps falling and it feeds through to the energy market and what the energy companies pay, focus on what the energy price cap from Ofgem is going to do. Now, as I said, the current level is £4,279 per year for the average household dual fuel. Cornwall Insight, which are a company that analyse the energy market and have been spookily accurate in predicting where the price cap from Ofgem will be, they have predicted that that will be from April around about £3,209 a year. if you notice, that's currently £200 more than the government's energy price guarantee. So the energy price cap from Ofgem will still be too high. We'll still be on that guarantee from the government if it exists. From July, they actually think the energy price cap from Ofgem will drop to £2,200 based on what's going on in the energy market. That's great news. And then from October until the back end of the year, it will go up again marginally to £2,241 a year, which if the energy price guarantee from the government even exists, it'll be way below that £3,000. So if you were sticking on the standard tariffs, your energy bill, this is the kicker, the summary of it all, your energy bill next winter is likely to be £2,241 on average, based upon where they predict the energy price cap will be, assuming we haven't got a functioning energy market with lots of great deals where we shop around, which is about 10% below what we're paying now. That is broadly because at the moment, the average under the energy price guarantee is about £2,500 a year. So the message is, it looks like the predictions, which might not come true, may come true, are that you are going to be paying about 10% less for your energy next winter than you are for this year. Now, that means if you're paying £300 a month direct debits to your energy company, then you're going to probably be paying about £270 per month next winter. So there is going to be no respite unless something happens, and hopefully the energy market starts functioning again, where we get people offering fixed price deals that are much lower than the energy price cap from Ofgem, and therefore you could fix in and get cheaper deals. Competition comes back into the market. So unfortunately that's not great news, but it means, like I talked about mortgage rates probably this time last year, when I was telling people how to plan for the future, and that was by putting money aside for your hike in mortgage rates, something I'm going to come on to in the next part of the podcast. It's sensible to be planning that your energy bills are going to be somewhere in the ballpark where they are now, likely to be about 10% cheaper, hopefully be better than that. Now, one way, obviously, to reduce your energy bills in the meantime is to reduce your usage, but also the Demand Flexibility Service was launched by the National Grid on the 23rd of January this year, and it's meant to allow almost 1 million households to benefit from reducing their demand at set times of the day on set days and being basically paid to do so. Now, you can sign up via your energy company. They will invite you to join. Mine did. One thing you're going to have to bear in mind, you might be thinking, I've not heard from my energy company about this, because we've got an article on the website. We'll put a link in the notes which tells you all the energy companies that are taking part, and pretty much, as far as I can tell, it's everybody, and they will invite you to sign up. I've done it, and then they will tell you about the day where this scheme is working. It's not every day, it's set days. They will tell you in advance and when to reduce your energy usage, and then you get paid for doing so. Now, you won't get contacted if you've got your marketing preferences set so that you don't get marketing messages from your energy company, which a lot of people will do. So that's something we've discovered in the office. So if you've got your marketing preferences set in a way that are quite restrictive, they won't have invited you. So you might have to look at that. The one caveat is that you have to have a smart meter. So if you don't have one, then you won't be able to take part in this, because they need to monitor your usage closely during that period. So go check out with your energy provider if you're interested. You are supposed to be able to save up to about £100 under this scheme. They're going to run so many days of this potentially this year. But some people are sceptical about it, but we've heard from different people who have saved £4 in the day that they've done it, because they've gone out and gone for a walk in order to reduce their energy usage. So there is something else that you can do to help reduce your energy bills in the meantime.
Okay, so let's move on to something that you actually briefly alluded to in that piece, and that's interest rates and mortgages. You've got some further insight on this that you want to just cover on the pod.
So yeah, I want to talk about mortgage rates because, again, it slightly dates this podcast, but people have been writing into me en masse asking what's happening with mortgage rates. Now, I do write about it regularly, about what the market predicts is happening with the base rate at the Bank of England, which in turn influences what's going on in the mortgage market, as does things like gilt yields. Now, if you sign up to our weekly newsletter, moneytothemasses.com/newsletter, you'll get a roundup on Sunday at 10 a.m. of all the stories that matter to you stuff that we've written and published and stuff from around the internet. And in there, I regularly update stuff to do with where interest rates are going. Now, this week, the Bank of England increased the base rate from 3.5% to 4% in a move that was widely expected. That's a 14-year high. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, I do a video as well that talks about this sort of stuff straight after we get these interest rate decisions, which is updated monthly. But it's worth me covering on the podcast for people who keep asking about it. Now, after the mini budget in September, there was a complete disaster. Gilt yields spiked, expectations of base rate hikes on the Bank of England shot through the roof, and the mortgage market effectively broke. And we got to the point where mortgage rates on fixed deals leapt from, say, a 2-year fix, which back in February 2021 would have been on average 2.5%. We were looking at things that were way north of 6%, 6.5%. So a huge difference. And you'll hear stories of people who had even worse offers than that. The Bank of England base rate at the moment is at 4%. Going into this meeting, the view of the market had changed significantly over the last month. So we're at 4% now. The market had been predicting, in the wake of all the chaos in the autumn, that we could see the base rate get up to about 6% in the next year or so. That has come in, and now the market is predicting that the Bank of England might do another small rate hike in the coming months, and it might peak at around about 4.25, maybe to 4.4% by July this year. And then rates will start to slowly come down over the next couple of years. And in 5 years' time, they're predicting that the base rate will be just above 3%. That's significantly different to what we were getting a couple of months back. Now, of course, market expectations change quickly. It's based off of financial instruments in the markets, which obviously have an expectation of interest rates built into them. So that can vary quite quickly. But what does it mean for mortgages now? A 2-year fixed mortgage rate back in February last year was 2.44%. In January this year, so January 2023, the average was 5.8%. Now, the best rates you're going to likely get will depend on your loan to value, but it's at the moment, as I make this, it's somewhere around about 4.5% for the best loan to values for a 2-year fix. Now, that varies considerably depending on your loan to value. You'll probably be paying more like 5, but it gives you an indication of what you're likely to get in terms of interest rate. For a 5-year fix, we've now got to the point where the average has dropped to 5.2% from 5.63%, still massively higher than what we had a year ago, which was 2.71%. If you're looking again at probably the best rate that I'm seeing out there, you're looking at just over 4% on a 5-year, about 4.1%. That's obviously factoring that drop off in the Bank of England base rate expectation in the coming years. But it does mean that if you're remortgaging, like the millions of people out there that need to this year, you're going to have to factor in the difference between the rate that I've just said and the rate you currently pay. Now, for every 1% difference in that rate, then you're going to be paying roughly an extra £50 a month for every £100,000 that you borrow. So you can do the maths on that, but that is what your mortgage is likely to go up by. So it does mean that it's not great news for 2023 for your energy or your mortgage bills. But as I talked about last year, planning ahead, we can do that again for energy as well. That's the reality of the situation that we are in. Speak to a mortgage broker. They can shop around for you, find the best deal. If you don't have a mortgage broker you can trust, then we'll put a link in the show notes that goes to our article about where interest rates are predicted to go, and in there you can find links to services that can help you find a reputable mortgage advisor.
No, that's all interesting stuff, and actually this is very similar to the piece you've just done on the energy, in that people are coming to you and saying, well, I'm hearing sort of mixed messages, perhaps I'm hearing now mortgage rates are coming down, are we going to see that? But of course it's the same in the energy market, there is that lag, and the reality is if you haven't remortgaged in the last couple of years, don't forget you're still on those old rates, 2020 rates, which are very, very different. We've seen 10 interest rate increases since December 2021. So the reality is we're still going to experience quite high rates for some time to come before we start to see these mortgage rates coming down.
So Andy, moving on, less of the doom and gloom. From what we see on Money to Masses, there are plenty of people trying to escape and book holidays. So you're doing a piece about airport lounges.
Yeah, that's right. I just wanted to cover a very quick piece on airport lounges. Now, I know there is a cost of living crisis going on at the moment, and many people are struggling to find the money to get abroad this year. But I thought it was worth mentioning because there is actually a cost saving element to this particular piece. And so I thought it was worth bringing to the pod. And so I'm sure many listeners will have heard what an airport lounge is, and possibly many have used them themselves. And it's worth mentioning that these airport lounges aren't reserved exclusively for business class travellers. And actually they can, in some cases, work out cost effective to use them. So we've written an article on the Money to the Masses website, which I will link to in the show notes, which actually lists all of the airport lounges across the UK and the cost of accessing those. And while the prices aren't cheap, when you actually consider how much you spend at an airport, or can spend, certainly if you arrive early and you've got a family, when you actually total the numbers and look at how much it costs to access a lounge and what you get for that, there starts to become a point where you think, well, actually, this might be worthwhile. So firstly, let's consider what you are getting for your money when you access a airport lounge. Typically, you'll get unlimited buffet style food. Often you'll get unlimited drinks. Sometimes this will include alcoholic drinks, but not always. Certainly unlimited soft drinks, and that will normally include teas and coffees, water, juices, and even fizzy drinks like Coke, etc. You'll get a selection of snacks on offer, access to plenty of comfortable seating. Sometimes there'll be lounges or beds. You'll get access to plug points and being able to charge all of your devices. And some lounges will also offer shower and even games room facilities, which will be particularly handy if you've got some young travellers with you. And talking of young travellers, you will need to pay a child price for accessing these lounges as well. And I'll go through those in just a second. But just a point to make is some airport lounges do offer free access for children under the age of 2. So make sure that you check before booking whether you need to pay for a young traveller or not. So let's have a quick look at some of the prices then. And we've looked across all of the major airports across the UK, and I'm just going to give you some prices. So Belfast, George Best Airport, the price to access the Aspire Lounge is £22.99 for an adult and £18.49 for a child. Now, Glasgow International, that's £27 for an adult and £19 for a child. Liverpool John Lennon Airport, £31.99 for the Aspire Lounge for an adult and £18.49 for a child. Moving on to the major London airports, you've got Gatwick. They offer two different lounges, North and South terminals. The Gateway Lounge is £28.99 for adults, £20 for children, and the Aspire Lounge is £29.50 for an adult and £18.49 for a child. Moving on to Heathrow, a bit more expensive at Heathrow's Terminal 3 and Terminal 5. Again, it's the Aspire Lounges. They'll cost you £35 or £40 at Terminal 5 for an adult and £20 for a child at Terminal 3, but £40 for a child at Terminal 5. So I suppose what I'm saying here, looking at these prices, Terminal 5 is going to be the most expensive option, especially if you have a family across all of the major airports. So really you need to cost how much value you're actually getting for that access price, £40 per adult and child. And finally, covering a couple of the other airports across the UK, Manchester International, you've got the Escape Lounge. Terminal 1 is £28.99 for adults, £18.99 for children. Terminals 2 and Terminals 3 are a slightly different price, but they're very, very similar. Newcastle, the Aspire Lounge is slightly more expensive again, £34.99 for adults, £18.99 for children. And actually Southampton down on the south coast, they have a Spitfire Lounge. It's quite a small airport, just £21.50 for access for adults, but it's the same price for children, so there's no discount for children. So that just gives you a rough idea on how much it will cost to access these lounges. And again, you'll get as much food and drink as you need. You'll sit in comfort, you'll be able to charge your devices, and in some cases you'll be able to take a shower and even use some of their games room facilities if they've got them. Now, of course, as a family, you'll need to cost out how much you would normally spend at an airport on drinks and food and entertainment and see if it's worth it. And so for a one-off trip as a family, you'll need to do the numbers. You'll need to work out how much you think you may normally spend at an airport on food and drinks and entertainment and see if that actually works out cost effective for you as a family. But if you're a more frequent traveller, then there are additional discounts to be had because you can actually buy an annual membership which gives you access to lounges across all of the airports across the UK. Now, there's a leading online lounge access site that provides these annual membership passes. It's called Priority Pass, and it covers 1,300 lounges. And what it does is it actually brings down the access cost for you. And so there's 3 different packages on offer, which could help to save you money if you regularly access airport lounges. The standard package, it costs you £69 for a year, a one-off cost. And what that'll do is that'll bring down the overall cost of each access to an airport lounge to £24 for you and your guests. So if you regularly access airport lounges, it's going to give you that discount every time you go. And so if you can save more than the £69 annual cost for that pass, then that'll definitely be worthwhile. They also do 2 additional packages, and you'll need to be a particularly frequent flyer to gain the maximum benefit from these packages. They do a standard plus package for £229, and what that does is that gives you 10 free lounge passes for you, and it then discounts them to £24 for access each time thereafter. And it also gives access to your guests for £24 for each access. And so again, you need to work out the numbers. Effectively, that £229 that you're paying gives you 10 free lounge passes. Well, therefore, that's going to work out at £22.90 per access, if you like. And then it reduces it to £24 for each access after your initial 10 free lounge passes. And if you're a really frequent flyer, then you could go for the Prestige package, which is £419 for annual membership. And that gives you free unlimited access to lounges for the year. And again, it does reduce the cost to £24 for any guests. And so that could definitely be worthwhile if you're a real frequent flyer. So yeah, there we go. It's just really highlighting that there are lounge access passes available. We would recommend that if you think that this is something you want to do, try and book it in advance, because lounges do get busy at particular times in particular locations. But when you consider from the research that we've done that many people spend in excess of £50 at an airport lounge on food and drink, it could be an option for you and your family if you're travelling abroad this year. So Damien, that's it for this week, isn't it?
So that is it, Andy. Until next time.
Until next time.